Good afternoon. My name is Terrence Carter. I'm the managing partner of Carter's. I'd like to warmly welcome everyone to the fourth of Carter's 2026 Winter Spring Charity and Not-for-Profit Law webinars. Details of our webinar series can be found at our website of www.carters.ca. The webinar topic today is T3010 filing time, 10 tips on completing the T3010. And is presented by Theresa, a partner of Carter's at our Orangeville office. Theresa practices exclusively in the area of charity and not-for-profit law and is an author in the area of charity law. I know that you're going to really enjoy Theresa's presentation today, and she has a lot of helpful insights to share and is a really good presenter. There's obviously significant interest in this topic as we have more than 470 people registered for the webinar today. As is the tradition of our law firm, Carter's recognizes that its work and the work of its community partners takes place on traditional Indigenous territories throughout Canada. We acknowledge the 46 treaties and other land agreements that cover the province of Ontario. We are thankful to work and live in these territories and acknowledge the enduring stewardship of First Nations, Métis and Inuit people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across Canada. A link to the presentation materials for today's session was sent to you in the 1-hour reminder email you should have received. And the video replay will also be available on our YouTube channel within 24 hours after the webinar. The webinar today will consist of a presentation by Theresa for about 45 to 50 minutes, followed by about 10 minutes of questions and answers. If you'd like to submit a question at any time, please go to the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, Zoom screen, and enter it there. We'll attempt to answer as many of your questions as possible before the end of the webinar at 1 p.m. sharp. Please note that the presentation today does not constitute legal advice, and attendees are therefore encouraged to speak to their own lawyers to obtain advice as necessary. Just before we get started, I didn't want to lose an opportunity to share a joke or two. Why did the chocolate shop's taxes get audited? The owner had fudged the numbers. What kind of tax is placed on paper? A tariff. A tariff. Okay, Theresa, now over to you as you start your presentation. We really look forward to what you're going to be sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me share screen first, get the technology out of my way, and then I can start talking. So as Terry said, the topic today that I'm going to speak about is about filing the T3010, 10 tips on completing the T3010. And it will not include how to fudge the numbers on the T3010. That is outside of my presentation. As I will talk about, the T3010 must be filed by charity 6 months after year end. Most charities, their year end is December 31st. So that T3010 for December 31st, 2025 will be due at the end of June in a little bit over a month. So I'm happy to talk about, share some tips on how to complete and file the T3010. Very happy to have more than 470 people signed up. And I know some of you are my clients, and I promise that I will wave at you. Hello, clients. So let's start the presentation. It's not moving. Let me see advancing slides. There, good. So I will talk about some highlights of how to complete and file the T3010, and also a few issues in the T3010s, which I may or may not have time to talk about. I will not be taking you through the T3010 question by question on how to complete it. If you want help in that regard, there's a very, very good CRA webinar that takes you actually through the T3010 question by question, and then there's a script. I am doing advertising for CRA webinar. I'm not being paid for that, but it is indeed a really good CRA webinar. And also, as you can see, this is a rather long deck of slides. I will highlight the high points. The fact that the slide is quite long deck is it will be information and resources for you after the presentation. 3010 filing time. Hopefully, this is not you when it's about time to file your T3010. Why is T3010 so important? All charities have to file the T3010 within 6 months of fiscal year end. Failure to file can have serious consequences, which includes revocation of charitable status. T3010 is not just a tax return for accountants to complete. It has real practical and legal implications, which I will talk about in a minute. Most of the information in the T3010 is public information available on CRA's website, available for the public, including donors and the media. So that is a very, very important point that I would talk about. It also reflects compliance with requirements in the Income Tax Act and CRA's policy. It would show transparency and accountability and builds trust and loyalty to funders, donors, public at large, and your stakeholders. T3010 requires reporting information on various accounting and tax legal issues, and I will talk about some of them in a minute. And 10 tips. These are your 10 tips. But then as I go along, is many, many more tips than just the 10 tips. So actually, I'm grouping all of the tips in 10 groups. So we'll go through each one at a time. Tip 1, the very first one, use the correct form. I have clients who gave me draft T3010s in the past and say, Theresa, can you take a look? We've drafted it, make sure that everything is okay. The accountant went through it, the auditor went through it, here's the draft. The first thing that I see, I look at the bottom of the form, and then there are quite a few that I actually have to tell them, I'm sorry, you used the wrong form. Go to CRA's website, find the correct form, do it over again, send a draft to me, and I'll take a look. So every time you fill out a T3010, do keep in mind that CRA does update the form from time to time. The most current version is called version 24, which CRA updated at the end of 2023 for use for charities for fiscal year ended December 31st, 2023. So that's the current form to be used. I was looking at CRA's website last night. That's the form that is on CRA's website. And this is a quick list of new changes made in version 24. It's there for reference purposes. I'm not going to go through these new changes. One thing to keep in mind is all charities, including inactive ones, must file the T3010. So for inactive charities, even if there is no revenue, no expenses, no asset, no programs, you have a nil return, you still have to file the T3010 if you do not want your charitable status to be revoked. Tip 2, file the T3010 on time. Set your alarm clock, diarize everywhere that you can see, put up sticker notes all over the place. It's still 6 months after fiscal year end. The effective date of filing is depending on how you file, whether you file online or whether you file by mail, the effective date of the filing is different. And I'll talk about it in a minute. This beautiful, wonderful infographics is from CRA's website, which is helpful. Failure to file the T3010, like I said earlier, it can lead to charitable registration being revoked. And once charitable status is lost, then the charity cannot issue donation receipts. It will no longer be exempt from income tax. And worst of all, there's a Part 5 tax on the charity. And the Part 5 tax equals all of the asset of the charity. and you would have to give all of the asset as a tax to CRA, or to give it all to another arm's length charity in good standing with CRA and what we call is an eligible donee under the Income Tax Act, and that's what we call a revocation tax. It is possible to reapply for registration after losing charitable status, but do keep in mind, it is a brand new, fresh registration. You have to meet all of the current CRA requirements at the time of registration, and you apply, fill out the application form online. Once it's done, completed, you upload all of the relevant documents, then you stand at the back of the line and wait for CRA to process the application. Normally, right now, a new application takes about 4 to 6 months for CRA to have someone to look at the application. Doesn't mean approval. So think about losing charitable status. You cannot issue receipts. You become taxable, and then you have to put together a new application, wait for another 4 to 6 months for CRA to look at it, but there's no guarantee that you will get it back. Once CRA decided to give it back, then you still have to file all the missing T3010 and pay a $500 penalty fee. And there's a myth. The tip is there's a myth. I've heard clients saying, we've filed a T3010. We've not heard back from CRA. So we are in good standing with CRA. We are good. We have no problem. CRA accepted our filing. That is a myth, complete myth. Filing to T3010 online only means that the charity has met its filing deadline date obligation. That's it. It does not mean that it has been completed correctly. It does not mean that the charity meets CRA's requirements. The first time that you will hear back from CRA on how you did on your T3010, whether you've done a good job or not so good job, is when you got lucky and got picked by CRA for a CRA audit. How to file? Fresh off the press, there's no more faxing to CRA as of April 1st. CRA turned off its fax machine because it's outdated communications. It is difficult. You fax something to CRA. You have to make sure that CRA picked up the fax from the fax machine. It's just lots of problems. So there are only two ways, and two ways only, to file T3010. You file it either online or by snail mail through Canada Post, and the address is there. If you file online, then the effective date is when you hit submit online. If you file by mail, then the effective date is the postmark date on the envelope, provided that it is eligible for people to see it. If you file online, CRA really promote that method of filing. It avoids human error for CRA to translate the paper copy into the computer system. It's processed immediately. CRA's website says that if you file online, then the public portion of the T3010, which I will talk about in a minute, the public portion will show up on CRA's website the very next day. The trick is you would need to register My Business account. There are links on how to register, and I put the link on the slides there. Just a word of caution. It is not an easy step to register the My Business account if you're doing it the very first time in your life. It takes time, and I have stories. Today I'm going to, in addition to tips, I'm going to share some stories. I have clients who have told me that they wanted to set up the My Business account. This particular client contact himself is a CPA himself, very experienced accountant. And he told me that after he set up the My Business account, the experience is worse than a root canal. I have another client, this is just this past weekend. A client was late in filing to T3010, so filing it by mail is not going to work. So they have to file it online. And this particular person has My Business account in his own personal taxes, his business, his company. So he's not unfamiliar with My Business account. So he just needed to add the charity of which he support to the My Business account thing. And and then I said, well, in that case, hopefully you have no problem, but you have a problem, call CRA. Afterwards, he told me that he did call CRA. He had a problem. He called CRA. He stayed on the phone with CRA for 2 hours for it to be set up. So the moral of the story is, if you want to set it up, do it early. Don't leave until June 29th, before the due date of June 30th. CRA will send reminders to file the T3010 according to the address or contact person on file with CRA. Eventually, they will send a formal notice called 2051A, and by the time you get that notice in by registered mail, and if you get the registered mail, you have 90 days to file. Eventually, when CRA ran out of patience, they will decide to revoke the revocation, and then they'll issue notice T2051B. In that notice, it will state the effective date of revocation, followed by publication in the Canada Gazette for the official revocation. Once you get that, it's a rule of no return. Revocation cannot be stopped. And therefore, it is very important to make sure that the contact information with CRA is current, so that reminders can be sent to the right person at the charity, so that you can get the reminder notice. I have had clients where they said they never got CRA's reminder. Turns out the reminder went to a treasurer who was no longer on the board. Reminder went to a staff person who has left the job, but the staff person was the only person authorized to talk to CRA and the My Business account. So this is not just a one client scenario. I have heard many of those examples from different clients. So make sure that the contact person at the CRA end is updated on CRA's record. After filing, what do? Keep a record of everything that you have filed, hard copies and soft copies, and keep proof of filing. If you submit it online, then make sure that you print the confirmation thing at the end of filing. If you file by mail, then normally I don't recommend just put a stamp on the envelope and drop it into the mailbox. Don't do that. Take it, go to the post office, and buy a stamp at the post office counter. Have the post office clerk put it on the envelope. Take a picture of the envelope with that stamp before they drop it into their box behind the counter. Do that. I have also tried to take videos of the actual process, dropping it into the box. Just make sure that you can prove that you have filed it. A little bit of a tip and caution for charities incorporated under the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. A few number of years ago, they were able to file their annual return under the ONCA as part of the T3010 filing. So they file the T3010. As part of that, they do a little side form, then their Ontario filing annual return is good. That stopped as of 2021 when Ontario Business Registry moved towards an online portal system, and therefore charities in Ontario under ONCA, they will have to file a separate annual return to meet their corporate requirement. I have clients who are not aware of that being stopped in 2021 and therefore miss filing their annual return for a number of years. So that's not a good thing. So make sure, so this is a tip for Ontario incorporated charities. Tip 3, going along, ensure the filing is complete. What does complete mean? T3010, so this slide gives you the breakdown. The yellow box is the actual T3010 for purpose of presentation. I'm going to call it T3010 proper. The actual form itself. There are 6 sections. Section A, identification, directors, program, financial information, certification, and then also attach the financial statement that is a part of the T3010 proper filings. And then there are 7 schedules. Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 8. Not all schedules are applicable for every charity. So only the applicable schedules will need to be completed. And you will see that there's no Schedule 7. No, I did not make a mistake. There's no Schedule 7. And why? This is $1 million question for you. And then there are 4 additional forms. Form T1235 is the listing of all directors and trustees. I'll talk about it in a minute. That must be filed by all charities. And then the other 3 are optional. They only need to be completed where applicable. So this next few slides, it gives you a bit of a screenshot of what those section A to section F in the T3010 proper is about. I got excited doing screenshots, put it into the slide. So here it is. So it will give you a bit of a walkthrough. So for information purposes, I'm not going to talk about it. Section D. Section D is on financial information. And in the form proper itself, it would need to be completed by smaller charities. But for charities that has gross revenue more than 100,000, or if it has property more than 25,000, then it would not need to fill out section D. You leave section D blank. Instead, you fill out the more detailed Schedule 6 instead. And this is a listing of the different 7 schedules. There's no Schedule 7. Okay, so make sure it's complete. What does it mean? Make sure you complete all sections of T3010 proper. If you answer yes, no, if it is 0, then say 0. You must answer all questions and all applicable schedules. Very important, you must attach financial statement. If you do not attach financial statement, CRA does not treat the T3010 filing to be complete. And on the form, if you go through the form tonight, you'll actually see there's a line says, if you don't attach a financial statement, registration may be revoked because it's not complete. If income of a charity is over $200,000, then CRA recommend the financial to be audited. Why it is recommended by CRA, not required? Because whether financial should be audited or whether charity or the corporation can do a review engagement cheaper to pay the accountant or even an in-house compilation, it is governed under the applicable corporate legislation that the charities is incorporated under. That is not an income tax act or CRA jurisdiction. Therefore, CRA recommend the financials to be audited under certain circumstances, but it's not a requirement. But at a minimum, whether financials is audited or not, it must be, of course, accurate. Don't fudge the numbers. And then it must include a balance sheet, income statement, and if it's audited or if it's prepared by accountant and there are notes to it, then it should include all the notes. And on CRA's website, there's a note that says common error. One of them that CRA pointed out is make sure that the financial statement has the same fiscal year end as the fiscal year end of the T3010 that you're completing. Apparently, they must have received T3010 where the charity uploaded financial from a different year end. Do not attach anything else other than the form proper, financials, applicable schedules, and the optional forms listed. Do not attach anything else. This is a clear warning in CRA's guide. If you need to file any amended documents, you want to request to change your fiscal year end, you want to update contact person of the charity with CRA, do it separately, but not as part of the T3010 filings. Ensure it's accurate. There is a section E in the certification sections that asks the person who signed to swear that everything is accurate. Do keep in mind that so the majority of the T3010 is public and therefore is available to the media, the donors, funders, and that's all the more reason that it would need to be accurate. You don't want the public to see inaccurate information on your T3010 listing on CRA's website. The T3010 is often the first place the CRA goes to before they start an audit. And CRA audit can be an office audit or can be a field audit. Office audit would usually start with CRA reviewing the T3010. A field audit would involve CRA sending an auditor to the charity's premises to review books and records, and they would compare the books and record with the T3010 filed. If there are discrepancies, then questions will arise. Is the T3010 wrong, or is the books and records wrong? It also would evidence compliance with CRA's requirements, which I will talk about in a minute. Tip 5. Not all questions are for the accountants. Many questions have legal and operational implications. I'm going to give you some examples. Question C. In the form, now text in italics is copy and paste from the form itself. So the form wants the charity to fill out ongoing and new charitable programming during the fiscal year that you're filing to T3010 that furthers the charity's purposes and would include actual charitable activities like running a homeless shelter, running a church, and would also include qualified disbursements, which include gifts to qualified donees and grants to non-qualified donees. So that means it's not possible for the accountant or the auditor to figure it out. The person to answer this question must have on-the-ground operational knowledge about the purposes of the charity set out in its status patents or articles of incorporation, and knowledge about ongoing programs and new programs that further those purposes. Question C14. It asks, did the charity issue any of its tax receipts for donations on behalf of another organization? This is a trap question. Of course, you have to say no. If you answer yes, you better start brewing your pot of coffee for the CRA auditor. Question C3 and Schedule 3, it asks for information about full-time staff, part-time staff, how many and how much that they're paid. Obviously, the person who completes this question should be familiar with the charity's human resources and staff situation. I have a client who had the auditor complete the T3010 for years and years and years, and their charity thought, oh, the auditor, they must be correct. Finally, that's 1 year. They look at the draft T3010, then they realize that the number of staff and the compensation pay is completely out of whack. They have no idea where the information comes from. C13, it asks for information whether the charity allow any donors to use property of the charity. Obviously, the auditor would not have information on that. It also wants the charity to calculate the fundraising ratio, which is based on 3 lines in the T3010. The auditor can help fill out those 3 lines, but to compute the ratio and to see whether the ratio and the actual fundraising activities meet CRA's fundraising ratio guidance will need to be reviewed by the charity staff itself. And very last tip, accurately categorizing revenue and expenses is absolutely important. For example, if there's a particular event, it may be possible to categorize an event as a fundraising event or a related business event. Depending on the categorization, the line to be included in the T3010 will be different. Real life example, another client, they asked the auditor to do the T3010 for a number of years. They have a particular program that have always been reported as a related business in the T3010. No issues, all fine. In one particular year, the auditor, based on his experience with other charity clients, the auditor changed that to become fundraising revenue and fundraising expenses that caught CRA's attention, audited by CRA, and then CRA said, no, this is not an acceptable fundraising event. Not a pretty picture. So it's not just the accountant, you need the operation on the ground, the staff will need to actually see what's being inputted into the T3010. Numbers in the T3010 must be supported by the financials, and it will also require recategorization or allocation. So in the T3010, there's a short section D on financials, which I talked about for smaller charities. Schedule 6 is much more detailed. So I'm going to focus the discussion on the detailed Schedule 6. If you understand the concept in Schedule 6, then you'll be able to understand how to complete Schedule D for the smaller charities that if you're involved in. T3010 requires a charity to report all expenses. In your income statement, you have revenue and expenses in your income statement. That expenses in the income statement will need to be split into 3 portions in the T3010. Give to qualified donees, grants to non-qualified donees, and everything else, you must input it into the pre-designated lines 4800 and 4920. The total is 4950. Examples would include advertising and promotion, line 4800, travel and vehicle expenses, 4810. I'm reading from Schedule 6. So if the charity's chart of account is not the same of how CRA categorized the expenses in line 4800 to 4920, then the charity would need to somehow recategorize your expenses in your chart of account and your financials in order to be able to translate those numbers into the T3010. So this is tip 1. Second, of the total in line 4950, T3010 requires charity to split that into 4 categories, depending on the nature of the expenses. Line 5000, charitable activities, 5010, management and administration, 5020, fundraising, 5040 on other expenditure. An example would be related business in the example that I gave. The most common mistake is that these categorization, these 4 lines are left blank. Don't ever leave them blank, because this is how we analyze whether the expenses spent by the charity are on proper programming, charitable programming, or whether they're on fundraising over the fundraising ratio. So these 4 lines is absolutely important. So this lines, text in italics, is how CRA, the guy, explains what those means. Line 5000 is for things that run charitable programs. It could include programming expenses, or if you have occupancy, you rent space or you rent a building and you use 9 of the 10 floors to run programming, so that will be occupancy costs. 5010 will be administration and management, things like board meetings, membership meetings, pure accounting, auditing fees, your insurance premium, admin staff, your payroll staff, those will be all treated as management and administration. Fundraising is line 5020, a bit of an obvious. I'm not going to go through that. It is very often that a certain expense item, like staff, should be categorized because it actually relates to different categories. And in that case, then that expense will need to be allocated, split up into the appropriate lines and reported consistently and on a reasonable basis. Here are some examples. Occupancy costs. There's an expense line in the T3010 on occupancy costs, which includes mortgage, utilities, management fees, to the property management. So if space is used for programming, then you enter that into line 5000. If the space is used for related business rental, then put it under other. Staff salary, same thing. If you have a particular staff that part of the time is to do program, part of the time is to do fundraising, part of the time is to run board meetings, then you need to split up that staff salary among the 3 lines. It is very tedious, but it is absolutely important. Absolutely important. Never ever forget that. Some information in T3010 is confidential and some is not. And understanding what information is confidential is helpful. So therefore, when you see certain things like asking for the director's date of birth, you cannot say, oh, this is confidential. How can I let you know my date of birth? I'm going to leave it blank. It's not possible. You cannot leave it blank. So information that is confidential means they will not show up on the CRA's website portal. And it includes section F, where the charity is asked to state where it keeps its books and records, and the name of the person who completed the T3010 and signed the person's life away by swearing that the T3010 is absolutely accurate. Schedule 4, it asks for the name and of an external fundraiser used by the charity, and whether the fundraiser is at arm's length with charity's director, and also the name of any foreign or non-resident donor who donated more than $10,000. If it is a private foundation involved in holding corporate shares and required to fill the excess corporate holding worksheet, that is also confidential. A bit about the T1235. This is one of the 4 separate forms that charities have to file. This form must be filed by everyone. Some information is public, some information is confidential. And before we get to that, just a word about what name to be listed and what date to be included, because it wants the charity to list names of all directors, less trustees, or like officials who has office in those positions at any time during the fiscal period of the return. Say if you're doing return for December 31st, 2025, so that means anyone who has been on the board starting from January 1st, 2025 to 2025 December 31st, you need to list the names there. If someone was elected to join the board in that year, then you include a start date, leave the end date blank. The end date is for someone who left the board in that fiscal year. So if someone left the board because the term was expired at the AGM in the middle of the year or a director resigned or removed by the board, then you put an end date, which is the date within some time in that year that a person left. The start date was a historical date when the person first joined the board sometime earlier. And then for ongoing directors who have been on the board from before this fiscal and continue to stay on the board after this fiscal, you will have to include the start date, which is the historical date when the person first joined the board, but leave the end date blank. Confidential information would include residential address. So this is home address, not address for service, not business address, not the PO box address. Phone number, where the person can be reached during the day, and also the day of birth. You must complete it. You cannot leave it blank. Whew. Okay, we still have time. So, this slide, before the tip 8. Although certain information is private, but under the Income Tax Act and under certain circumstances, CRA would have to disclose the information, and this slide is just for your information purposes. Okay. Now, tip 8. There are many issues that charities have to report in the T3010. I am not going to talk about every issue, and if you do, we'll have to stay here until tomorrow, lunchtime. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight a few of those issues that are new in version 24 that was released by the CRA the very last time, which is the current T3010 when it was first released at the end of 2023. So these are some new issues. I'm not going to talk about them in detail, but just quickly highlight them. The slides is there. There's some screenshots there. Just want to highlight some issues food for thought. Number one, for the first time, charities have to report in the T3010 whether it holds any donor-advised funds, DAF, donor-advised funds. So donor-advised funds, so first I'm going to explain what CRA requires, and then I'm going to explain what it means. CRA defines donor-advised funds to be a fund segregated, okay, segregated. Remember, segregated into donor accounts, owned, controlled by the charity, so this is fine. And then where it is contributed by individual donors, and that the donors can make non-binding suggestions on payouts from the DAF. So remember those underlying words. It must report 4 values: total number of DAF held, total amount of the DAF held, value of all donations received into the DAF, all of the DAF accounts, and total value of gift to qualified donees and grant to non-QDs paid from the DAF. But if the payout is to run programming, it's not included and not required in line 5864. So make sure that you look at the wording clearly. However, being a lawyer, we look at, okay, CRA, this is what you want. What does the judges said? What does the court said? Is the donor advised funds. Ad law, donor advised fund is defined much, much broader than how it is defined by the CRA in the T3010 for reporting purposes. It can involve advice from donors on various aspects, on the use, on management, on investments. So not every donor advised fund involves non-binding donor advice on payouts from DAFs. So that means when the charity completes the T3010, it will need to look at the wording in the questions in the T3010 very carefully, and then look at its record, how it has been tracking the DAF it held, whether they are segregated, whether the donor advice is on payout, or that the donor advice is on something else, not related to payouts. So it would require very, very careful comparison between the funding tracking records of the charity versus what CRA wants in the T3010. Here's a link to a paper, a presentation by my colleague Jackie Damsher. Very, very helpful presentation, and I highly encourage you to take a look at that. The second thing that is new, that foundations are required to report in the T3010 are restricted funds held by foundations. This is a new reporting requirement that must be done by foundations, public and private, but not by charitable organizations. CRA defines restricted funds in a certain way, and that definition would relate to what restricted funds means when a charity completes the T3010. It is funds tied to a specific use. It can also be endowments. And then also the funder, including a donor, grantor, lender, or payer, limits how the funds can be spent. So the focus is on restrictions on use and restrictions on spent. So this is the 2 lines in the T3010 on restricted funds reporting. Again, as a lawyer, what does the judges said in court cases? Ad law, restricted funds is much, much broader than the narrow restriction in the CRA's definition for purposes of the T3010 refiling. Restricted funds can involve different types of restrictions imposed by donors or grantors. It could be restriction on time, how long that the charity will need to hold the capital, restriction on use, how the fund can be used, on how it can be managed. It may or may not always be restrictions on payouts, on use. So therefore, again, the charities will need to carefully look at the wording in the T3010 for reporting purposes and how it has been tracking restricted funds in its records, and then determine how they will need to report the T3010. Tracking disbursement quota. This is a big topic. I don't have time to go through the entire disbursement quota. So at the bottom of this slide, there's a presentation that I did made in November of last year. So if you want more detail, go to that. So today is just a couple of slides just to highlight disbursement quota called the DQ, not qualified donors, QD. So this is DQ, not QD. So the DQ disbursement quota is the minimum amount that a charity must spend on its charitable activities or qualifying disbursements. And it is based on a percentage of property not used directly in charitable activities or administration of the charity. So this is extremely important. In practice, it basically generally means money set aside invested, or money or building set aside not used by the charity itself. So for purpose of our conversation presentation for the next few slides, I'm going to call it the asset base. There's a minimum exemption rules. If the asset base of a foundation is less than $100,000, or if the asset base of the charitable organization is below $25,000, then the DQ does not apply. Or the other way around. Foundation is 25, charitable organization is 100. Then the DQ would not apply. But asset over that minimum threshold, there's a 3.5% for the first million, and then 5% for anything above the 1 million. And this slide, there's a bit of a screenshot on requirements in the T3010 for charities to calculate the DQ. Bit of a general basic calculation that everybody would have to calculate, even if the DQ is 0. Then it will need to go into a bit more detail to identify which charity is below the threshold amount, and therefore you don't have to do the detailed calculation of the detailed obligation in Schedule 8. So, and then this is a bit of a highlight. Schedule 8 would take the charity through some calculation on how to calculate its DQ for the current fiscal year and to anticipate and estimate the DQ for the next fiscal year. So this is just a bit of a general information. And then another topic that charities have to fill out is qualifying disbursements. Qualifying disbursements includes gift to qualified donors. Then the charity, if a charity make gift to qualified donors or other charities or other entities that are under the definition of qualified donors in the Income Tax Act, such as the United Nations, the federal government, municipal government, provincial government, there's a list in there, then the charity would have to fill out Form T1236. If a charity makes grants to non-QDs, and if it is only below 5,000, then it can report it in the T3010 proper itself. If it makes grants more than 5,000, then you would have to complete a separate Form T1441. So this slide is there. I'm not going to go through in detail. Again, this is a huge, big topic that we don't have time to go through today. The last thing is there's a new concept of impact investing. It requires charity to report any impact investment made. I'm like, what is it? Sarah explains that impact investments are investments in companies, made in companies or projects with the intention of having a measurable, positive environmental or social impact and generating a positive financial return. So that's all it says in the form and in the guide, and only 2 lines. It is not clear. This is new for charities in Ontario. If you compare that with social investments under the Ontario Charities Accounting Act, is just not clear. So the tip is not clear. Tip 9. Next couple of minutes, tip 9, get board approval. Yes, get board approval. Why? Because information is public, as I explained earlier. It is accessible to the public, to your stakeholders, to donors, to funders. It is the first thing that CRA look at before CRA conduct any audit. evidence compliance with CRA policies and Income Tax Act. By signing in Section E, the person who signs sworn that it is absolutely accurate. So the board will need to know what has been filed with the CRA. The last thing that the board will want to know on a CRA audit is, turns out the T3010 has been completed wrong in the past. Why didn't we know? Why didn't the board ask to review a draft T3010 before it was filed? So get board approval as long where possible. Last tip 10. Stay up to date. Stay up to date. Read CRA's guide. It has a guide to take you through the form proper and also the schedules and also the optional forms. It is a very, very helpful guide. Sign up to our newsletters. That's where I assume that you've heard about the webinar today. Sign up CRA's webinar on how to fill out the T3010. They hold the webinar a number of times throughout the year. There's a French version, there's an English version, there are different time slots. It's really helpful. It's not long. After that, it's posted on CRA's website with a script of the entire webinar. It is very good. But that webinar take you through the T3010 proper, not the schedule, T3010 proper question by question. It is different from how we have approached the T3010 filing in the presentation today. Complete it early. Do not be caught by surprise. Get legal review of the legal aspect of the T3010 if possible. I often review draft T3010s, but only from a legal perspective. I don't do the number crunching, which I leave it to the accountant, to the auditor, to the controller, the financial person. But I look at the analysis and the categorization and the other questions completed in other sections in the form proper. Final words. It is a complicated form. It's not just a text form. It I've explained a number of times. Some sections are tedious, but absolutely important. Very important to make sure it is accurate. Most of the form is public. You need to make sure that public access to information to charity is absolutely accurate. In order to complete the T3010, charity would need to understand what the form means and what CRA requires, and then make sure that they completes it accurately, do not be caught by surprise, and consult professional advice, professional information early and get board approval. But then today is not legal advice.
Well, thank you, Theresa. That was a great walkthrough of a really technical topic and very entertaining to watch. And I know folks watching will have really learned a lot. So thank you for it. We have 8 minutes left. I'm going to try to do as many questions with you as possible. First one says, we just found out that we had missed filing our last T3010 and we are late. We do not have CRA's and my BA set up. Is there a way to stop CRA from revoking our charitable status while we work on our T3010?
Perhaps if you beg and just keep begging CRA. Case in point, I share stories. I have a client, is very similar scenario, late in filing T3010, doesn't have his my CRA my BA set up. So I think I've talked about that already. He went on the phone and stayed on the phone with the CRA for 2 hours to set up the my BA account. I have another client. They finally filed the T3010 late. As I said, you stand at the back of the line. You have to wait 5-6 months for CRA to proceed. So they called CRA themselves. They went on the CRA 800 number. They begged and begged and begged. They got mercy from CRA. And then they got registered quite quickly, much faster than everybody else. But those are exceptions. Those are exceptions. So if you're willing to beg, if you want to take the chances, it may be possible, but there's no guarantee. So it's better to avoid the need to beg by filing on time and filing the complete T3010.
Okay, thanks for that, Theresa. Who should do the allocation of the expenses into line 5,000? that you mentioned, our auditor or our office staff?
Definitely not the lawyer. I don't do the allocation myself. When I see clients drop T3010 with this lines blank, I explain the rules and then they do the allocation. It should be a joint effort between the auditor and the charity's on the ground staff because only the charity would be able to tell whether the travel expense, whether you bought plane tickets to send volunteers to a programming in South Africa, which is charitable programming, or whether it rented a bus to bus directors up to Northern Ontario for a boat retreat, which is management. Only the charity staff would know. So it should be a joint effort.
Okay, great. Next one is you mentioned it was $1 million question. Why is there no Schedule 7 in the T3010?
Right, it was not a mistake. There's no Schedule 7 confirmed. If you go to the series website. Schedule 7, it should have been around long enough. Charities used to be, there used to be a requirement under the Income Tax Act that charities cannot do political activities. In those days, there is a Schedule 7 for CRA to report whether the charity itself actually engaged in political activities. That got changed in 2018 to allow charities to do PPDDA, political activity. I could never say the long PPDDA, political dialogue, engagement, community, and because of that, the charities no longer have to report what it does on PPDDA. So that's why there's no Schedule 7.
Okay, good. We've got a number of attendees that have asked multiple questions. So just to be fair, I'll just ask one question from each individual. This one's from a CPA. It says, regarding the DQ, if a charity holds investments and uses the investment income and intends to use the investment themselves in charitable operations in the future, and it's not clear, it might be a program-related investment, might be impact investing. Are these considered assets used directly in charitable activities so that therefore, Theresa, it wouldn't form part of the base for calculating the disbursement quota?
Very good question. Take an example. The charity has $1 million set aside. You invested it. Out of $1 million generate income. So charity can leave the income back in the capital to continue to be invested, or the charity can use the 5%, 6% income on charitable programming. That capital, 1 million, continue to be invested. So that 1 million would form the asset base. And then with the income, if the income got used by the charity, then it would not form part of the asset base. But if the income got plowed back into the capital, then that would increase the capital, the asset base from to 1 million to 1 million point five at the 5%. So it depends. Whatever that is invested, but then the income depending on how it's used.
Okay, and here's another question. When there is a significant change in a charity, i.e. change of legal counsel, can a charity apply for an extension to file their T3010?
You can beg. The 6 months is there, is frozen. It is what it is. If you know you will be late, you can give CRA a call, call the 800 number. You'll be talking to a CRA agent, and who I understood from CRA that they don't take notes when charities make inquiries. You can explain to them your circumstances, and I would anticipate the response will be, well, then in that case, do your best, file it by the deadline day, but it's really fact-based. If you beg and beg hard enough, like my other client who got registered really quickly, you may be able to ask CRA to hold off. Or if you are really like 2 days away from filing because someone's computer got dropped dead, you need to save the file to another computer in order to file, maybe, but there's no guarantee.
Okay, two more questions in the last minute we've got. Can T3010s be e-filed now?
You can file this through the portal. That's what I understand, but I don't think you can do the e-filing.
Okay. Next, to clarify, financial statements should be attached in addition to completing Schedule 6? That's a question.
When you file it, you have the form proper, and then you have the Schedule 6, which is, well, the schedule is part of that form, and then you have to attach the financials when you file. So it'll be two documents if you file on paper. If you file online, then there will be boxes for you to click.
Okay, good. We are right on time. Thank you, Theresa. It was a great walk through a very challenging topic, and we really appreciate it. Folks, just be aware that the next complimentary webinar in our Winter Spring series is on Wednesday, June the 3rd, from 12 to 1 p.m. EDT, with Jackie Dempster, a partner at our firm, presenting on the important topic of advising clients on the ONCA after the transition period, practical advice and tips. And also, please feel free to sign up for a monthly newsletter at carters.ca. We put out every month except at Christmas and during the summer. We'd like to thank the support team that we have. Great team: Brenda Parsons, Sunil Patel, Jennifer Kirchhoff, and Selena Natu for helping out with the webinar today. And Theresa, and thank you in particular for a great presentation. A lot of hard work went into what you presented today. So thank you on behalf of the attendees. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day.